Welcome all to the Amateur's Guide to Shogi, and welcome back to the 2021 Oui Title Match. This is Game 3, played between the title holder Sota Fujii and the challenger Masayuki Toyoshima. In this particular game, Sota Fujii is playing black, and Masayuki Toyoshima is playing white. The current game score is 1-1, and there is 8 hours each on the clock. Also, just recently, I think 2 days ago, liveshogi.org added the Kifu function, so now if you play on the analysis board, the Kifu will automatically come up and you can copy and paste it. So I will finally be able to leave the Kifu in the description for you if you want to go and check out the game yourself and analyze it yourself. Hopefully if I just paste it into the description, you should be able to copy and paste it yourself. If not, let me know and I'll figure out some other way of doing that. Anyway, let us get started. Now, I'll be honest, the opening of the game is very boring, but it does get more interesting later, trust me. Now, of course, if you've seen any of my other recaps of basically all of Sota Fujii's games at this point, the title matches, you will not be surprised when you see stock standard opening, white swanton loss, bishop exchange. I think we saw Sota Fujii play this last game as white. Now he's playing it as black, or rather, Toyoshima is playing it as white and Fujii is responding to it as black. And you just see the standard developing moves, and it's basically symmetrical. You will see as the game progresses, it is completely symmetrical for a while, or it becomes symmetrical. So at this point, it is symmetrical bar for one piece, and that is that white has not moved this pawn up one square. That's the only difference. And just to quickly describe the sort of setup that they're both going for here, this is a castle, rudimentary castle. It's basically Yagara, but basic Yagara. They both move the king up by just one square to put it into a slightly safer situation, and get ready to castle if need be. So this is, a castle without a king, but the king is not far away. The silver has been developed, ready to sort of charge into the middle of the board. Knight has been developed, also facilitating that. These pawns are pushed on the king's head with the rook backing them up. This gold is left here, but you'll see them moved up in a moment, developing and just defending this silver and defending just sort of the whole area. They've got a wide berth and also clearing way for these rooks. Reason they put the rooks on the back rank is for lateral movement, but also to defend the whole back rank against drops. So back rank, once you develop a lot of pieces, often becomes a spot where holes develop, a hole where nothing is defending it, and you can drop a piece right in your opponent's camp. Very annoying. So the rook sort of just defends the whole back rank and prevents that from being a problem. So anyway, at this position, they finally split from the symmetry. As you see, Sota Fujii, instead of lifting this gold, instead going for a bit of an edge attack. But then they quickly switch tacks and start going at each other in the middle. Now here's an interesting moment. You actually see Toyoshima move the king back one square for... I honestly don't know why he didn't just go here. Like if he was wanting to castle, I don't know, because once Sota Fujii plays this move, putting the rook on the same file as the king, which is obviously a very, dangerous position to be in. You don't want your king in the same file as a rook, especially when there's only 2 pawns in it. And then Toyoshima immediately moves his king to the side, effectively wasting a move there. So I don't know why he did that, but that's what he did. And Sota Fujii, instead of going for this edge attack, simply makes use of this lost tempo and seizes the initiative and attacks in the middle, backed up by this rook, getting a pawn exchange and hoping for a silver exchange. But Toyoshima, instead of simply capturing the silver and allowing his opponent's rook in, instead develops his own rook, pinning the silver to his opponent's rook. So you can't just take the silver, you would lose the rook and the game. So that needs to be dealt with. This is now a pinned piece. It is defended though, so Fujii's got some time. However, he plays a nice pawn drop here. This is actually an interesting pawn drop. There's 3 pieces that can take it. Try and figure out which is the best one. I'll give you a couple seconds, or you can always pause the video. So Toyoshima actually took it with a silver. You can't take it with the rook because you will blunder a nasty bishop drop, this is that back rank hole that I was just talking about. The reason you want to keep the rook here usually. And yes, you can just move the rook to the side, attack the bishop, but you can trade the bishop off for the gold, and then of course take this silver, and your rook has free reign over this entire file, and you can even start thinking about dropping silver here, and it's already very dangerous for white, allowing your opponent's rook this much of a wide berth, and you also have to just escape your rook from this silver. So very dangerous position. I think the computer is already saying about +5 for black here. So yeah, you can't take with the rook. Back. Instead, Toyoshima takes with the silver, but of course this allows Fujii to not take the silver. He escapes the silver in this direction, snipping another pawn, because now his rook is not hanging. This, of course, is just kicked out, and finally we get this silver trade. Silver moves forward. Toyoshima is trying to now repeat what his opponent just did, an attack on the middle file with the rook and the silver, sort of a climbing silver, but to the right a little bit. And Fujii develops his own silver and then moves his rook back out of the line of danger. But we actually see something repeat here that Sota Fujii did against his opponent in, I believe, the Kisei title match, which is this bishop pin. If you remember back to game 2, maybe, of the Kisei title match against Akira Watanabe, Sota Fujii himself did this against Watanabe, and it became a thorn in Watanabe's side for basically the entire game. Obviously, you can't move the silver because, well, you can move it, but only along this diagonal, because otherwise you would hang this bishop and a horse promotion there as well. And so, of course, this is a pinned piece, so you just want to attack the pinned piece. It's very annoying. But Sota Fujii doesn't, he's not afraid, he doesn't move the silver, instead just moves the rook back, having this lateral movement and also defending. This is the last square in his entire camp, which was not defended before, so he has this movement for the rook, much more than it was here. He still has the forward movement that he had when it was here, and defends the last hole in his camp. But of course, this allows Toyoshima to attack the pinned piece. These two moves are actually quite interesting. Instant replay. This pawn drop, yes, it's free, but it's just wasting a move. You've moved the rook back there. You don't want to immediately move it back, and also this is now a hole. And there might also be like some sort of, I don't know, silver drop here or something along those lines. If takes, then takes, and that's a fork. And of course, this pawn drop, yes, you can take it, but if you don't take it, as is the better play, it blocks the rook's line of sight to white's camp, and also allows this silver to develop and get into the attack without fear of a rook trade. So yeah, then of course Fujii just decides, well, if you can do that, I can do that, and blocks his opponent's line of sight with this silver, backed up by the knight, and also allowing him to eventually come in and snip this pawn back up because it won't be under fire. But then, of course, pinned piece is attacked. Fujii just simply moves it back, and Toyoshima moves the bishop into the center. If you can develop and maintain a bishop in the middle of the board, very powerful, most powerful position for a bishop, I guess, in Shogi. Except, as you will see, this bishop doesn't have a lot of places to go. It is kind of a little bit stuck, and of course, sitting there, it can just be attacked, which it is, and then he has to move it back. But at the same time, he has developed the bishop to a point where it is sort of very nastily eyeing up his opponent's camp, and as you will see here, he then drops a silver, offering a silver trade, and in the process allowing his silver to get closer to the opponent's king, gradually developing, and also open up his rook's eyes to defend this pawn with the bishop. So establishing a nasty dangling pawn here, backed up twice, and developing his pieces gradually towards his opponent's king. So with those trades, he managed to set up this nice development. Now, another pawn is dropped to prevent this rook from seeing this pawn. And of course, yes, you can take this, but that would be trading silver for a knight, which is undesirable, but, Toyoshima just is like, hey, I can add another attack to that, one that's worth the same as this knight. So he does. Fujii just simply castles his king, which is something that you don't see him do often if you've seen many of his games, but he decides that it's warranted in this position and allows this knight trade to occur. Now, Toyoshima captures with the rook. Why? Because, well, one, he just put the silver here to get it closer to the king, but two, this rook is now very mobile laterally. So not really in this direction, but in this direction, it is eyeing up a very weak pawn, completely undefended, but most importantly, would be allowing his rook to infiltrate his opponent's camp. Yes, this is defended currently, but, maybe if silver drop, if you could manage to get it there, is potentially very dangerous for black here. So he's trying to snip this pawn. So what does Fujii do? Well, a very nice pawn sack, which of course is taken. Now, the question I had in this scenario is, what if you can you just ignore this? Is this attack faster? And the answer is, well, I was going to say you can try and figure it out. The answer is no. I'll just give it to you. If you try and just infiltrate anyway, they will, of course, just simply capture, and this is just too dangerous. You can't allow, one, you would just lose a gold for a pawn, which is not a good trade, but also your king would literally have no castle left. You also don't really want to take with the gold here because that is weakening your castle. If you can force your opponent to move golds diagonally forwards and away from the castle, that's very beneficial to you. It breaks the castle because they require 2 moves to get back from a diagonal forward movement. So, and that's just a waste of time that you don't want to have to do as the defending side here. So too dangerous. But you can of course just take it with the rook. But that runs into another problem of this pawn drop. And you're like, okay, fine, I can just take that. But if you take that, well, yeah, bishop fork. Once again, seeing the motif of this back rank drop. They are both undefended, and this is already +8, I believe, for black if you run into this blunder. Because, yeah, you can move the rook or defend it or block it or whatever, but you lose a gold, and a horse promotes in your face, which is, not exactly a nice situation to be in. So, of course, in this position, you would have to simply move the rook away, allowing this dangling pawn to maintain itself, and also just you don't get to infiltrate. So that is the answer to the question, can you just ignore this pawn? So, of course, you just take the pawn. But this allows the exact same bishop fork. It's not as dangerous now, obviously, because it's only a pawn and a gold, so you can just save the gold. But this allows a horse promotion, which simultaneously defends this square from the rook getting in, which is really cool. But, of course, Toyoshima just simultaneously bolsters his castle and attacks this horse. And as you can see, the horse is trapped. It actually has no moves. It's completely trapped. But obviously, Fujii has a plan. Fujii always has a plan. And he drops a knight, equal danger, attacking the rook. Technically, the horse is worth more than the rook, if you're just taking it by point values, because, it's promoted and the rook is not. However, that would just be unacceptable to Toyoshima because, one, his castle is very weak to a rook drop because there's tons of lateral space over here. And two, this horse is trapped and his rook is not. So trading a trapped piece for a not trapped piece, even if the trapped piece is worth a little bit more, is just not a nice trade to have to do. So instead, he simply escapes his rook, knowing that his opponent cannot escape his horse, unless he wants to. Yeah, that would not be a good trade. How does Shogi? I just portmanteaued Sota Fujii. Sota Fujii, how does he do with his horse? Well, he just trades it off for the silver, simultaneously weakening this castle and also just getting a silver for his troubles. And you might think, he just traded the bishop for a silver. That's not so good. But actually, the material balance here is 2 silvers for the bishop, which is pretty much fine for both players. But typically speaking, 2 pieces is better than 1, especially if it's 2 generals for a major piece. So most people would prefer the 2 silvers than the bishop in this scenario, especially since this castle is getting very weak. Um, what else did I have to say? I don't think. Okay, let's just move on. Okay, I think in this position, Toyoshima, yes, does something. I don't want to say silly because he's a professional and I'm the idiot, but it does become a bit of a pain in the neck for him. And in hindsight, I don't think it was a good plan. Yeah, he moves the king back into the center of the board, into his opponent's rook's line of sight. And I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, obviously, at face value, you can understand why. It's because this side of the board is completely cracked open. His opponent can make use of this completely open file. And there's no castle here. And over here, in this side of the board, well, he's got sort of a thickness of pieces here, which would act as a bit of a buffer against his opponent's attack. So if he can just escape his king all the way over here, then, well, that would be a little bit safer. So that's clearly like the basis of why he tries to go for this plan. But at the end of the day, that's just allows his opponent, Sota Fujii, to immediately jump on him. So he immediately attacks this gold at the king's temple. You obviously have to deal with this, so he scoots the gold to the side, but this allows this pawn drop. Now, you could move the rook back, but that's pretty dangerous. Instead, he simply takes the pawn, but this allows this bishop fork, this silver fork backed up by the knight, gold king fork. So he just moves the king over here, which is what he wanted to do anyway, but in the process loses this gold. So this is already looking pretty bad for white in this situation. Now he tries to make up for it by moving his rook across and targeting these two weak pieces. Whatever happens, one of them has got to go. They are both undefended. He's X-raying this knight here. But I believe in this position, Sota Fujii plays just an awesome move. Like, it baffles me. It baffles my mind how he comes up with this sort of stuff. You can take a moment to try and figure out what he plays here. I can almost guarantee that you won't get it. If you do get it, you're almost certainly a better player than I am. Or you can pause the video. Anyway, the move he plays, and I love this move, is this silver drop, which is just, for me, it's mind-blowing. For someone of Sota Fujii's caliber, or even just any professional's caliber, this is probably just par for the course. But to me, this move is just amazing for a few reasons. One, this is actually raising the danger on this attack. Why? Because this pawn is hanging. And once you take this pawn and promote, you are attacking this bishop. Bishop is worth more than the silver, right? And then you could also take the now unprotected knight if you felt like it. So it is actually raising the danger on this attack because this bishop can't move. Remember way back when I said that when he moved the bishop here and then moved it back, that it was, a little bit, it wasn't really looking at anything. It was a bit stuck, surrounded by pieces. Yeah, well, now it's coming back to bite him in the butt because it can't go anywhere. All of these squares are defended, and it obviously can't move backwards. So this bishop is trapped, and so this is threatening to take it. But at the same time, his opponent, Sota Fujii's opponent, is trying to run his king over to this side of the board where he thinks it would be safer. But Sota Fujii just drops this silver and completely cuts off his opponent's escaping route. Now, if you've seen any of my Sume Shogi puzzles, you'll know that to checkmate the king, you want to surround him completely by lots of pieces and cut him off from both sides and limit his escaping routes. And this is what this silver does. This king is not getting out in this direction, right? But what makes this so awesome for me, especially, is the fact that he responds to this attack on this side of the board to a silver drop on the complete opposite side of the board, a multi-purpose silver drop to a hole in his opponent's camp on the other side of the board. Just the board presence and the genius on display is just baffling to me. Anyway, point is, I love this move. This is a great move. It's good. It's good. So how do you reply to this? Well, you need to defend this bishop somehow, and you can do that by simply defending the pawn. However, moving the silver back does make one square weaker, 10 points if you can figure it out. but you will see that come into effect later. But even with this pawn defended, this attack on the bishop is stopped, but still this silver is preventing the king from escaping, so it's still a great drop. And now he simply saves this other silver, but in the process loses this knight. But this is okay, because he now can go on the attack, encasing the king on all sides, and this is obviously a very strong attack. You're ready to promote and attack this gold, and if they take, then one, they would lose a gold, but two, you'd be really dangerous here. But Toyoshima is like, you know what? I think my attack's faster. And Sota Fujii's like, you sure about that? And Toyoshima's like, yeah, pretty sure. It's like, I don't think so, man. I feel like this attack kind of is going nowhere. And Toyoshima's like, nah, I'm just going to keep attacking and allow this gold to be taken. And also this bishop is trapped. So remember way back when I said this weakens a square? Yeah, 10 points if you guess this one. The bishop is now trapped in another direction, still can't move anywhere, and this gold is then dropped, backed up by this pawn, and it is completely trapped. And as you will see momentarily, this bishop is going to be pretty instrumental to Sota Fujii's attack. Obviously, you can't save it, so he instead tries to go on the attack. Sota Fujii just deals with it, keeps trying to attack, loses the bishop, and recaptures. And Sota Fujii brings the silver closer to his opponent's king, and unpromotes it, so keeps it as a silver instead of promoting it to a gold. Why? Because he needs to prevent his opponent from escaping through this little gap here. So he keeps it as a silver, protects that gap, and also is bringing the king closer. Sorry, bringing his pieces closer to the king, and it is already very, very, very dangerous for white. But he keeps trying to attack anyway. Sota Fujii simply moves his king to the side, and finally, Toyoshima is forced to defend, but it's too little too late, because in this position, Toyoshima resigned. Why? Well, this is a threat mate, and it's a threat mate that is very difficult to remove, and even removing it, you end up in a terrible position. I think it's between plus 20 and plus 30, or even plus 40 for black at this position. It's a very simple threat mate, actually. It's mate in 3, I think. If you just do something random and don't defend against it, then you just use this bishop that he picked up from here, and drop it here. The rook cuts off the king this way, so the only move is to go here, and of course, gold drop finishes the game because of this unpromoted silver defending this square. And you think, well, I mean, could you defend it? Maybe drop like a gold here or something and, defend this drop here, but that's actually just a mate in 1. So you can't do it that way. The only way to defend it is actually to drop a pawn somewhere along this file. Like, for example, if here, rook takes, and then here, it's defended now, so you could take, and then rook takes, but then another pawn drop here, and well, I'll put it on the board for you. Actually, it's easier to just show you. Here takes, here takes, and here, and the rook has to move back because it is defended. Still very dangerous, though. Obviously, I mean, you could even do this straight away, and yes, you've now got space to run, but that's allowing sort of, I don't know, this promotion. Pretty dangerous. I don't know exactly what the valuation here is for black, but it would be very, very nasty. The other option is to simply drop the pawn here, which allows you 1 square's escaping room. But this is still really, really, really dangerous because it allows this gold drop, and regardless of where you run, you are running into this dragon promotion. And as you can probably tell, this is a really nasty position to be in. In fact, I think this position is plus 35.7 or something, according to the computer, to a pretty decent depth, which is, as I've said before in this channel, basically computer speak for it's mate, just not forced. So yeah, really, really nasty position. And at the end of the day, I may be an amateur, but I think even I can tell that it was this wasting of moves trying to get to the other side of the board that sort of spelt Masayuki Toyoshima's demise here. That and the fact that Sota Fujii is an attacking genius and finally castled his king like he never does. But anyway, that ends the third game in the 2021 Oui Title Match. So now the game score is 2-1 to Sota Fujii, the defending title holder. And I hope to continue covering these games soon and then move on to the AO title match, which is between the same two people. And just one last thing, if anyone is still listening, I've been thinking of putting in some, sort of music in the background of these videos. If I can try and figure out how to do that, I'll need to find royalty-free music. But if that is something that you think you would enjoy or would enhance the experience, please let me know. If not, if you just prefer to just listen with nothing distracting you, then let me know that as well. I try to give you the best experience possible. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.